there is an important question that we forgot to ask. So let's jump into our timeline, beginning with the inflection point, which was that Tucker Carlson speech. Now, I want to say this on that July 11th when Tucker Carlson gave that speech. I did, and I hope I'm not betraying anything too private here, but I asked Tucker about that speech. It's like, what inspired you? I went back and watched it, and he's going hard, and he's talking about where's all this money coming from, and is this even a meritocracy? Like, why are people that are not impressive billionaires? What's happening in this country? I asked Tucker, what made you say that? And he said, I had no plan to say it. It just came out of my mouth. It just like it was just inspired, just came out of my mouth when I hit the stage. There was no plan. Charlie said goes Max, and that is what Tucker riffs. And I do think um that was a part of there was something spiritual that moved him to
Yeah,
say.
Megyn Kelly recently exposed that Charlie Kirk told Tucker Carlson right before he went out on that Turning Point stage to go all out, meaning call out this administration for the Epstein files, how they're handling these documents, and how Israel is controlling this government. And we know Charlie Kirk was also questioning Israel and just how corrupt they are as a donor class for our country right before he was, may he rest in peace, before he was assassinated. And it blows my mind how he was so important, such an important piece to the puzzle on getting Trump reelected, yet they haven't really spoken on the Charlie Kirk assassination or the trial. Yet Candace Owens, who seems to be the closest and only friend of Charlie's, his real close friend, is actually digging into it and actually getting answers, something that this government should be doing. But instead, they're quiet.
That I will say that. Anyway, so that's July 11th. Tucker Carlson speaks at Turning Point USA's conference, and the donors freak out. Calls out Jeffrey Epstein. He says that people who serve in foreign armies should be stripped of their citizenship. He muses about Bill Ackman's wealth and where it comes from. We are told, even though we have not been able to confirm this with a shred of evidence, that it was 7 days later that the request came from to Turning Point USA from UVU's chapter for Charlie to have this event. That's very late in the day already, but again, we see no proof of this. We do know that right after that, our Egyptian yellow plane flies to Lincoln, Nebraska. And 2 days later, it is announced in Nebraska that they're going to be doing a trade and investment trip with Egypt. There was some private off record meeting that took place to make this come to fruition. And there were international professionals that were there per the media. But who were these professionals that met with Secretary of State Bob Evnen? Why is this meeting somehow off record? And when people, and they have done that, have requested information, they say, oh, there's nothing that's public that we can share with you. Thank you to, by the way, the citizens of Nebraska who did that. I received your emails, even if I was not able to respond. Anyways, then it departs Nebraska, our yellow planes, and it heads to Wilmington, and then it goes back to Cairo. We then know that in this same time frame ish is when Charlie vacations up to Maine for a couple of weeks to be with his family, goes off radar. We've got Mikey McCoy and his wife, Eliza, that join them for the first time. First time they're doing this joint family vacation. And Mikey's capturing these last videos that are going to warm our hearts about Charlie. And he's like amazing. That's just how he is. And on July 25th, Charlie speaks in Westchester, New York. At the end of July, this is a new little update for you. YRefi comes in as the #1 sponsor of the Charlie Kirk Fall Tour. So this is end of July, early August. And I'm wondering why they did that then, because that's pretty late in the day. Remember, this was something they freaked out about when I said, hey, this is not how Turning Point events are come together. They're not instant, actually. In the history of me speaking on college campuses and having headlined these tours, they are planning them at least a semester ahead. And then it was like mass panic. I got like Lila Rose and Ali Stuckey, who have never headlined their tour, suddenly saying, that's not true. That's not true. What are you talking about? And I'm talking about, I worked there. So I know exactly what I'm talking about. And that was a weird thing to debunk. And I'm wondering, why was this put together so late in the day? And I am musing here, but I'm wondering if YRefi, after Charlie lost millions of dollars, said, hey,
That's another big detail. Charlie Kirk turned down, I believe it was $150 million from, let's just call it what it is, Israel, the APAC lobby, to push Israel propaganda. And he denied that because he was having an awakening before he was taken out. May he rest in peace. And they can't have that because who's the number one, like, closest when it comes to the base, especially the college base? That was Charlie Kirk. And once he turned on Israel and started having that awakening, as I previously said, they couldn't have that anymore. So they offed him. And that's what I believe happened. Let me know what you guys think. But the more and more that this administration stays quiet, the more and more that they try to degrade Candace, who is the only one bringing the facts and the data, then it looks like they're complicit in it as well, and the cover up. And that's not what I voted for. And again, Charlie Kirk was the biggest reason Trump got elected for a second term, and this is how they repay him.
you can make that up by going on tour, you know? Like are willing to do this. And maybe Charlie actually wasn't planning on going on tour at all. And this tour actually came together very quickly. I'm musing on that. I'm not introducing that as a fact. I'm introducing that as a question. Anyways, back to our timeline. Why Refi is going big, and they are gonna be the main sponsor of this fall tour, and that's how that came together. Then we know that in very early August, Turning Point was scouting that location and that event, and they specifically requested for Charlie to be in that amphitheater. Now, apparently, Charlie had done, according to some insiders, had loved an event that he had done in an amphitheater environment in Nashville. But I don't know if he said, I only want to do that going forward. But I do know that Turning Point USA insisted upon that. The person that was orchestrating that event, Macy Crofts, was saying, like, this is what Charlie wants. And that could be true. August 2nd is when we have our French Legionnaires arriving in America for a 3-week training session in California, which is going to end on the 25th. And then a couple of days later, we have that Hamptons retreat, which Charlie Kirk himself described as an intervention, as an Israel intervention. And influencers who were there said that he was being pressed on his shifting viewpoints on Israel. And we know that the influencers were paid for by Bill Ackman. I don't think that that's particularly a big deal. Obviously, he has interests and was potentially coming on as a donor for Turning Point USA. We have what I do think is a big deal, which is Bibi Netanyahu calling Charlie and offering to take Turning Point to the next level. And that, my friends, is the billion-dollar
Ding, ding, ding.
question, maybe the trillion-dollar question. In exchange for what?
In exchange for him propping up Israel and saying that everything we're hearing about them committing genocide, or where our taxes fund, or the wars that they create, aren't that. And instead, turn your focus onto Muslims, or turn your focus onto any other thing besides what Israel does to our country and all the catastrophes they cause. It seems nonstop. It seems like the wars we've gone into, if you look in who created that, who was the people speaking behind that, it was Israel.
Have we considered that? This man is fighting like a 20-front war, and he calls Charlie Kirk and asks, do you want to come to Israel? We can take Turning Point to the next level. In exchange for what and through who? Because I'm going to guess that Bibi Netanyahu is not just going to write a check signed by Bibi Netanyahu and just do that as an act of charity. In exchange for what? What's he going to take Turning Point to a next level? This is something that nobody has denied took place. No one has denied that this took place. And Charlie declined. Charlie declined that offer. So what that signals to me is that Charlie then had information about maybe how they move money, right? Without registering for FARA. I don't know. I think that's a big question that needs to be asked. Let's keep going onto this timeline. Charlie says no, and almost immediately, 10 days later, we got our next point is that our planes come back out, and they're flying to Lincoln again. They're going to Omaha. They're going to Wilmington. They stay for one night. Charlie speaks in South Carolina. We have our yellow planes then returning on the 24th, again, always through Wilmington to Egypt. We then have French legionnaires have completed their training, and on August 24th, 27th, Operation Valhalla takes place between civilians and military men in Minnesota at Camp Ripley. Then we have the first public sign that went out on August 27th. August 27th, that is so late in the day to begin promoting an event. TPUSA, UVU, and a local BYU chapter share a graphic announcing that Charlie is coming to UVU, but there are no location details mentioned on that graphic. So, still not full details, but at least the first announcement goes out. On the 29th, we have Operation Bright Star, which commences that joint operation that we told you about, which is biennial between Egypt and the United States military and other countries that are coming together. And it is being reported that it is going to run through to September 10th. On September 2nd, Charlie sends out the email asking for a Doge audit of his company. And he announces that Justin Strife is going to be the new COO, taking over for Tyler Boyer, who was the COO. And then we have the first known public going out in local media that Charlie's coming to town and that it is going to take place in the courtyard. That's on September 2nd. Okay. On September 4th, our planes come in and we know what happens next. Charlie is in Korea for a couple of days. He comes back on September 10th and he gets assassinated. And that also happens to be the same day that that Operation Bright Star, that Cairo joint operation formally ends. Okay. So that timeline makes me uncomfortable. Okay. It makes me very uncomfortable. And I'm wondering if Charlie put together the Doge account. And I want to be clear, this part is speculation because something that he maybe learned when BB asked to take it to the next level made him think maybe I should look through Turning Point's finances. Like, where is this money coming in from and where is it going? And I don't know that for a fact, but I think it's a fair question, a fair investigative question is what inspired Charlie to suddenly be concerned about not just where the money was going, but where the money was coming from. Was an offer made to him that he declined? Yes.
That's true. He did decline the offer, and there's a reason why. And she goes into it as well in this part 2 right here. Explosive from today that everyone was talking about. And it looks like someone who was close to Charlie Kirk was involved in this as well. That's just what I'm getting from what I've been seeing people talk about and post about. Let's get part 2 going. Let's get it.
To no to a lot of money. But it was actually a tip that I received early on that pulled everything together for me in a really dark way. It was water cooler talk at Turning Point USA immediately after Charlie's assassination. A few people had signified and were speculating and thinking about things that were weird. And, I told you we had so many people from Turning Point USA that were just venting in our tip box and telling us that they didn't like the way management was acting and things were weird. And there were just a flurry of things that were coming in. And a few of them had signified that one of the things that was being whispered about that people thought was quite odd that they learned that happened on the day of Charlie's assassination was a rumor pertaining to Justin Strife. An oddly placed phone call that he made almost immediately, as they say. This is alleged. It wasn't on the phone call after Charlie was shot. And I will say allegedly because there's 6 people at Turning Point USA who have said this, that were talking about this. This rumor got passed around. They said that Justin had placed an immediate call to a donor prospect. And I said, that's weird. Okay. I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah,
And
that's weird.
everybody tried to figure out what donor that was. Now, it's possible it could have just been a very close donor friend. Charlie had them. He did. There were some donors that he loved like family members. And so that was a potential long shot thing, but just interesting. I'd like to know who he was so close to that required an immediate call. Then it turns out that these ladies told me that this donor actually had a pretty big piece of bait on the hook for Turning Point USA. A piece of their $1 billion company. They were anticipating some IPO, and that this was going to be life changing money. Okay. We're not talking like, oh, a check that's going to be reeled in for $5 million or $10 million or $50 million, or like the $90 million that Turning Point USA raised in the first couple of weeks following Charlie's assassination. We are talking like billionaire money, potentially billions of dollars. And this was a very big secret, a huge secret. Just a handful of people were allowed to even know about this, that this was happening. In fact, there's probably people that are watching this right now at Turning Point USA who work in donations. I think it's a pretty large department that have no idea, have never even heard of this, because that's how incredibly top level secret this was. Okay. But people began to find out about this because of just an unfortunate conversation that had been left unattended to. Okay. Now, why was the secret supposed to be so guarded? Why is this person getting a phone call? I wanted to know. I wanted to know more. And I start messaging our mommy sleuths and our daddy sleuths and all of my sources at Turning Point USA. And I'm saying anything that you can tell me about this in case this might be important. And I got an answer on the name of a donor, and I had completely forgotten because, again, this happened so early following the assassination. I am talking before I even went to Wyoming. My brain was still traumatized. I had so much information that I was trying to process while I was grieving that I literally forgot the big part that I learned about this donor. I forgot. And these young women told me that this donor was French American and that this donor's name was Pierre. And it wasn't until yesterday, after we went off air, that I presented to you all of this stuff about the DuPont family, that it clicked. And these ladies messaged me and said, oh, you figured it out. It's Pierre DuPont. Question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. I had mentioned Pierre DuPont on yesterday's show. And this took my breath away. I will be honest. I cried really hard yesterday thinking, my goodness, how could I have forgotten that this donor was French American, that was the big thing. And I was racking my brain trying to figure out that time because I hadn't even considered France's involvement in anything. Like, who do I know that's French and has tons of money and is involved in technologies and could possibly be working on a big check that could be kept secret because it's about to IPO and billions are on the line. And it all kind of came together. And I would like an answer about this Pierre, the billionaire French American donor. And I would like a clean answer as to whether or not it is Mr. Pierre DuPont. Yeah. Because this would be
Wow.
a devastatingly dark story. And my sources are very sure that this is what was on the line, that this was life changing money. And they are very sure that this individual got a phone call after the assassination. And I think that we deserve to know. I don't think this should be a secret, right? Let's share
How
it.
is this even like it's just amazing to see like the journalism that Candace Owens does compared to mainstream journalism, which is just propped and propped up by millions and millions of dollars in donors and just broadcasting, and they couldn't figure this out nor even touch the subject. Yet Candace Owens is being the only actual true friend and digging for the truth in regards to Charlie Kirk. And I'm glad that she's breaking the corridor when it comes to reaching an audience because she's number one globally and deserves the spot. But we need to start reposting, sharing, liking, commenting, and passing these types of videos out because we're sick of these corrupt governments, regardless what side this in power, lying to our faces.
Shouldn't be a secret. Why? And by the way, it leads to more questions like, how could you say that you knew that your IPO was going to lead to billions of dollars? How could you promise that? How could you promise that? And did Charlie know? Did Charlie know? And I'm going to be honest with you. I know a lot of billionaires, they don't part with their money like that. They don't part with their money and offer people pieces of their company, people that aren't even their family members. So why was that offer on the table? I have so many questions and I'm going to ask them publicly. And I think that we demand answers. We should all be demanding answers
Damn right.
because this is now starting to feel very, very dark. It's too French, right?
Yeah.
It's just too French. We just can't all be hanging out in Delaware. And there's one more thing that came in regarding Andrew Colvett, very close family friend of Andrew Colvett, had messaged me early on. And I, again, was not tracking any of this at the time, but they had said that they felt that Andrew Colvett was acting.
So true. You could tell, you actually could feel like the anger, the sadness, all the emotions she's feeling since her friend passed. And it's just sad, all of this, the rude and just untruthful stuff that they've been saying about her, when she's literally been the only person who has been the strongest supporter and in his corner trying to figure out the truth. And again, this administration, who is one of the number one reasons Trump got his second term, is lying to us. So I feel like it's just kind of a big FU to Charlie Kirk and everything he did for this administration at this point, for how they're handling this whole entire case as a whole. And shame on Kash Patel, shame on Donald Trump Jr., because he was like, they were supposedly like best friends, and he stayed quiet on this whole scenario. What a true friend that is. Candace, though, I do owe her all the kudos because I respect what she's doing 100%. We need more people like her.
Weird, and I'm sure that's not a big deal. I think we were all acting weird. Charlie Kirk was assassinated, but moreover, they had mentioned that specifically Andrew had told them that when Charlie said no to Bibi, he lost out on millions. Now I'm going to say allegedly because this is a tip, but I have that tip in writing. I'm not lying to you. And I thought to myself, that is so weird. How could the spokesperson at Turning Point USA be on the? How could they be gaining millions from that? What is the structure here of these contracts that even people that are in PR, people that are like running PR departments, are getting tips on the basis of donations? I don't know how this is working, but we need to figure out how this is working. I think it's really important that we learn the truth about what happened. Who's Pierre?
Well, you know, she's about to find out who Pierre is, and I'm going to watch the next show, and I'm going to tell you guys exactly what she says. But very interesting article. May Charlie Kirk rest in peace. We need answers, and we need them now. This administration, you're not going to be able to cover up the truth for much longer. We, the people, demand answers. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. I will see you on the next live video. Hope you have a blessed night. Peace. See you soon.